So adik-adik semuanya, you can also speak in bahasa later on. So Dr. Niti Hirawati has completed the education for bachelor degree in agribusiness from University Putra Malaysia in 1995, and then Master in Management from University Putra Malaysia in 2003, PhD in Management Science in Lancaster University, UK 2007. Without further ado, hello, Assalamualaikum, Dr. Niti Hirawati.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning to everyone.
All right, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Ramadan month, right? Okay.
Happy Ramadan.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this is the CV of Dr. Niti Hirawati. Thank you, Mbak Ella. Now, I would like to welcome you as a guest lecturers. Are you ready with the presentation material?
Inshallah.
All right, okay, good luck.
Thank you very much. All right, may I start now?
All right.
Ibu Novi, all right. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning to everyone. Thank you so much to the MC as well as our lovely moderator for today's session. I would like to also thanks to the head of the many heads that I heard just now, heads of the departments as well as head of the laboratory in terms of the operations and agribusiness. I'm really sorry if I didn't catch it properly in terms of the departments and then the units that has been addressed by the MC. However, I know that for today's session, there are many heads that are going to join us for today. Assalamualaikum all, and nice meeting you all, although it is online. I'm sure that if it is face-to-face or which physical, I'm sure that the session will be so lovely, and then we can meet and discuss further. All right, and I understand that this is a program 3-in-1 program. Okay, and then the participant will be from the bachelor, master, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll be given an hour for the lecture, Madam Moderator, Ibu Novi.
Yeah.
1 hour, right?
1 hour, and then we will go with the discussion. Students can raise hand after that, and then also write in a chat box during the lectures. Okay. I will bring it after.
All right, I understand.
Thank you.
Probably my lecture will be both language. If you would like to, okay, if the student, okay, mahasiswa would like to ask in Malay language or Bahasa Indonesia language, you are most welcome. Yeah? Right. Okay. So I can now start sharing my slide, right? Okay. So before, can everyone see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, so before I start, I would like to again say thank you for the opportunity given to be part of the event, and I'm sure that this is indeed an honor for me to be part of the program. So thank you so much again to all the secretariat and committee for this event. Right, so this is particularly the title that have been assigned to me. So I did not make it like a very detailed title, but I would rather go for the very general. It's about supply chain management, right? Okay, and then this is the table of content for my not lecture but sharing session with the student as well as the docent, right? So we are going to discuss about what is supply chain management, and then functions of supply chain management, forces driving supply chain management, elements and key features of effective supply chain management, importance of supply chain management, and before I end my sharing session with everybody here today is to show some global scenario of supply chain management during pandemic. during COVID-19 pandemic. So we will look into Malaysia perspectives as well as Indonesia perspective, right? So before I start, before we, in terms of what is supply chain management, so I would like to give definitions of what is supply chain management based on different scholar. So the definitions of supply chain management is started from 1995 by the scholar. Okay, so this is the definition provided by Ganeshan, that supply chain is basically a network of facility and distributions options that perform the function of procurement of raw material. So it started from the procurement of material, and this material been transformed into a finished product. Okay, and further on that, in 1998, the supply chain definitions or description has been evolved into alignments of firm, meaning to say that different firms will involve in the long supply chain, which will bring the product or services to market. Right, so the involvement from 1995 to 1998 is basically to show that there are involvement from many firms along the supply chain. Right, further, 2003 from Chopra, this is a very much popular for the supply chain scholar. So according to Chopra, so supply chain is basically consists of all stages. All stages meaning to say that starting from the procurement of raw material, process it into product to the stages that where consumer will be involved, which mean that consumptions. Okay. So we can see that the definitions or the descriptions about supply chain management has been evolved since 1995, and the latest one is 2016 by Christopher. That Christopher includes one or two elements that to show the activity we can categorize into upstream as well as downstream, and this activity will be related each other because it has going to be the relationship between supplier as well as customer in the whole supply chain. Okay, so this is basically to indicate that a network which is connected between the supplier as well as the middleman, also the product reach to the customer as the part of the downstream. Just now I heard that from one of the student under SOCSEC. So I would assume that SOCSEC is social economy, right, Ibu Novi? Alright, Ibu Madam MC. So he did mention about hiliran dan huluan. So in bahasa Malaysia we also use the same thing, huluan and hiliran. Okay. Alright. So if the student can ask questions throughout my presentation, Abu Novi, or after I finish?
After you finish.
Okay,
it's
after.
alright.
Alright.
Whether there is a question in the middle, they will just raise their hands.
Alright. Okay. Alright. Okay. So now, what we can summarize from the definitions or description from many scholars starting from 1995 to 2016, that supply chain management is basically the management, how you manage the flow of the goods as well as the services. So there are two things here, goods and services, and to produce these goods and services, it basically consists of all processes. Okay, processes in terms of transform your raw material into finished product. Okay, finished product will be in the downstream. Raw material will be to the upstream. Alright. So not only the process of the raw material into finished product, it is also something that complements with the flow of information. Because without information, the product that has been produced, by the manufacturer or producer, processor, it will not reach to the customer properly. It will not reach to the consumer properly. So supply chain is basically manage the flow of information, product and services across network. Why it is network? Because it involves many entities, it involves many players, it involves many agency firms, so that we call it as customer, enterprises and supplier. Okay, so this network is basically will need to have a coordination within these player. Okay, so this coordination is basically will help the efficiency along the supply chain. Okay, so as I indicate here from the diagram perspective, okay, supply chain is basically you transform input into output. Okay, so what we would like here is the finished product, which can provide the consumer in terms of the quality of the product, because the quality will transform into profits. The quality will transform into revenue, sales. Okay, so this revenue sales was basically will help, will facilitate the supply chain player, particularly to survive in the long term. Okay, all right. So this is to show you a very brief supply chain from the perspective of the diagram. So if you can see here, there are many. So supplier, plant number 1, number 2, distribution center, as well as customers. So it basically a network between supplier, the processor, manufacturer, and it will reach to the customer. Before that, it will be to the distribution center. Meaning to say that all the product will be collected and it will be stored in the distribution center before it reach to customer. Okay, so we can see from this diagram that some supply chain will have very simple supply chain network, but some supply chain basically based on the sector or industry will have complex supply chain. Okay, so this is basically from this we can develop some strategy. What strategy that you supply chain player would like to have? Probably to reduce cost, to reduce lead time from the manufacturing to the consumptions. So this strategy can be established. This strategy can be set up by all the supply chain player in order that good quality of product will reach to the customer. Right, so this strategy is basically will address in terms of the sourcing raw material, the procurement. Okay, so the procurement, the sourcing of raw material need to be effectively or efficiently carried out, because if it is not carried out from the beginning of the supply chain, it will not reach to the customer in a proper manner. In this case, it's a quality of the product. Okay, so it's also reflected in terms of the productions, the distributions, as well as the returns. So I will explain what does it mean by returns goods. Probably dosen any from your expertise, you know about the reverse logistic and right, reverse logistic, so on and so forth. Okay, so who will be responsible for the supply chain? Of course, supply chain manager, but this is basically depend to the agency, organization, businesses. Okay, what would be the name for the person who are responsible for the supply chain, right? So supply chain manager, production manager, it depending on the company or the business that has set up the supply chain. All right. So basically, the summary of what we discussed in the earlier slide is basically supply chain management from this perspective. So we can see that it started from the procurement. This is very important activity that every supply chain player need to take into considerations and then transform into product, and then it will reach to customers. So if we can see here, it is involved raw material, and then inbound logistic, the movement from raw material to the premise, to the business, to the company, and then it will store in the warehouse, storage in the warehouse, and then it will come into the operation management, where it transforms into product, and then now it puts or store in the warehouse. And then this is where the outbound logistic come into, and then it will reach to customer. So basically, what we can show here, the demand is flow opposite to the meaning to say that from customer to the procurement. Why? Because this is basically the information that the consumer needed in order for the manufacturer or processor to produce the product. Okay, so from here we can see that it is involved logistics, cost, inbound logistic, outbound logistic, operation, where we transform our raw material into into finished product. It also involves marketing and sale because it need to be reached to consumer, and also the services, which mean that probably in this case it is after sales service. Okay, all right. Okay, so how supply chain management work? How does it work? So supply chain management work is basically start from manufacturing to product developments. In order for the good quality of product, innovative product, the product has to go through all development stages. Why? Because we receive the information from the consumer that what they need the product to be looks alike. Okay, highly customizations. So that's why product developments need to be part of the supply chain strategy. And it also need to be complemented by information system. Why? Because the informations from the consumer need to be reached by other supply chain player. In the short period of time, immediately, so that every planning strategy can be established well. Okay. So from here, we can see that the product developments basically based on what the consumer needed will reflect or will lead to the safe cost. Safe cost in terms of the cost of production per unit, cost of per unit productions. So here, what we have the raw material, we can optimize it. Optimize in this case, we will be focusing in terms of to reduce waste, zero waste. I'm sure that you have heard about zero waste, and also some of the terms that probably has been introduced by your docent is circular economy. Okay, circular economy. So these probably later on mahasiswa, adik-adik semua, you can ask your docent what is the meaning of circular economy. Probably you can discuss in your class, and then probably the docent can use it as part of the assignments to the student. Okay, this is just my suggestions lah. Probably the docent have already thoroughly discussed in the class. Okay, so now here, this is another diagram from the perspective of supply chain management. So I took it from the Google, so we can see that it is involved manufacturer, automotive, and then end customer. Okay, so this is from the automotive part, right? So from the perspective of the another perspective, if to detail it out from the diagram is it is supplier, procurements of raw material, it reach to factory, distribution center, regional distribution center, retailer, and customer. So as I mentioned to you, the information flow has to be embedded in the supply chain because the information need to be reached to the manufacturer in order for them to come up with a good quality finished good. So now from here, we can see that at the bottom of the slide, the terms upstream, downstream, as what has been highlighted by one of our scholars, supply chain scholar just now, the terms of upstream and downstream. Okay. All right. So the supply chain also focusing in terms of the key service. Remember just now, one of the elements is the goods or services. So what kind of services that is offered by the supply chain? First, environmental protection, zero waste just now. Okay, information security, because the information that you get from the customer has to be secured. You cannot just reveal it to any entity without having the security elements. Okay, and then you also need to have a product safety and quality, because to take care of the consumer, the healthy product, safety product need to be embedded in the finished product safety and quality. That's why you have the elements of halal, the elements of GMP, the elements of best practices, the element of HACCP. So this one is embedded in the product safety and quality. Social responsibility. So you have to make sure that the plant, the factory that you establish will not harm to environment, will not harm to the locality, will not harm to the resident area. Okay, supply chain security in terms of the data provided by all the supply chain player from the procurement to the consumptions and other relevant services, especially based on the different sector or different industry. Alright, so another example from the pharmaceutical supply chain player. So if you can see that here is a more complex supply chain. The green line to indicate the complexity of this supply chain, because it involves lots of involve many supply chain many raw material supplier. It involves finished product where it is going to be packed, distributed, and before it reach to the hospital, and then before a hospital or the doctor prescribe the medicines to the patients. Okay. All right. So another example from the eye supply chain, more on the food. Okay. So here you can see that we have two main entity here from the supplier perspective as well as the customer perspective. But the product that you're going to produce is ice. Okay, so involve many supply chain from the customer perspective, right? So more on the agriculture, because I know that it is agribusiness department. So this is the diagram to show that how the frozen shrimp supply chain management looks like. Okay, so this is very common. So the terms that we look here in logistic and traceability. So here the traceability at the bottom of the diagram is very, very important nowadays, because consumers are now very educated. They would like to know what types of product that they consume, what types of product they use, where it is from, the originality of the product, origins of the country. So traceability has to be adopted along the supply chain, because this information is very crucial. Why crucial? Because we have learned because in this key service of the supply chain, one of the elements is product safety and quality. So how does it goes? Based on the traceability. I'm not really sure about bahasa Indonesia traceability. Probably kalau bahasa Malaysia adalah pengesanan. Ya, so betul ya Ibu Novi? Bahasa Indonesia pengesanan ya. Right. Okay. Okay, so now stages within the supply chain. So these are the stages as what have been highlighted, described by one of our scholar that involve upstream and downstream. Okay, so
traceability is pelacakan ya atau penelusuran, for example.
Minta maaf ya, pelacakan.
Ya,
Pelacakan, alright.
Yeah. So we know where the food is coming from and etc.
Okay, so different ya from bahasa Malaysia. Kita pengesanan, tracing and tracking. So pengesanan dan penjejakan. Okay, right. So may I continue?
Yeah.
Alright, okay. Now we are going to discuss about stages. So in general, the stages within the supply chain consist of upstream operation as well as the downstream operation. For the upstream, it involves more on the material flow into the organization. So just now we introduced about inbound logistics. Meanwhile, for the downstream operation, it's basically the flow away of finished product from the organization. So now we can imagine that it is outbound logistics. The flowing out. Upstream operation, the flowing into. Downstream operation is the flow away. I mean, write something here, right? Boleh ke Ibu? Sekejap saya tak, I cannot check. Tak apalah, dia tak keluar. Okay. So now, how does it show basically based on the another example of the upstream and downstream activity in supply chain? Okay, if ni dah keluar. Right. So if we can see here for the upstream, it consists of, okay, this is basically from the complexity of the supply chain. The more complex the supply chain, you will have different tier of supplier. Here, the diagram show you as part of the upstream, they have 3 tier of supplier. First tier, second tier, as well as the third tier of supplier. The more complex the upstream will have additional tier of supplier. Okay, but for the downstream here, okay, we can see that started from distributor, retailer, and consumer or customer. Okay, so now it will, from this diagram, we can see that it will also involve the capacity, the inventory level. Why inventory level? Because we have different tier of supplier, delivery schedule, because we have to be the scheduling, planning, the scheduling of the product, the scheduling, the schedulings of the finished product as well as the unfinished product, raw material, and as well as the payment terms. Right. Okay, so another just now upstream, downstream, but now some of the scholar have already discussed about the midstream. Okay, so now what is upstream from the perspective of agriculture? So this is basically the agriculture example. So upstream is started from the input supplier to provide seed, fertilizer, machinery, and in terms of the agriculture production, because we need labor, workers, as well as we need area, land. Okay, so from this, the midstream is basically how you handling, in terms of handling, storage, you store your raw material, you transport your raw material, processor, you produce you produce your produce or product, and then what is downstream activity is basically the distributor. It started to distribute to the retailer, it reached to the customer. Okay, so now 3 terms. Okay, upstream, midstream, and downstream. Okay, all right. Okay, so now conventionally, the supply chain management consists of 3 stages. Okay, upstream, midstream, and downstream. So how are we going to synergize this activity or stages? We need to synergize basically based on the internet driven, because we know that nowadays it is all activity will be facilitated or assisted by technology. So now this is the future internet driven of supply chain. So this diagram is basically to show you that everybody can communicate each other. Okay, everybody can communicate each other regardless of whether they are part from the upstream, part from the midstream, and part from the downstream. So everybody can communicate easily. Why? Under the internet-driven supply chain, it provides multi-directional communication. So the arrow here to indicate that multi-directional communication between supply chain player. Okay, and then also to show the network. Of course, we understand that the complexity of the supply chain, the network, but it is not so difficult with the technology assisted, because we can have a very complex network, but the easiness, the ease of use of the technology will help this supply chain player to communicate each other. Then one of the other elements is e-marketplace. Okay, you need to have e-marketplace. So everything that being communicated here is basically on what we call it as a e-marketplace. Because at the end of the supply chain consumption, we need to have consumer. Okay, so basically from here, you can manage your inventory, your order, and you know your capacity, because you have the elements of traceability and tracking just now. So you know your capacity. The demand will help you whether the capacity that you have in your plant, factory, will basically depend on your capacity. And based on this diagram, what will be the benefit that can be reached by the supply chain player is basically you can streamline supply chain and accurate information, because here the arrow here is to indicate the flow of information. So every information reached to every supply chain player, we can ensure the accuracy of the information. Okay, and you also can reduce supply chain costs because every information can be reached by the supply chain player in a short period of time. And you can increase your sales through accurate product availability. Why availability? Because you have already known your capacity. So you know your capacity, now only you can know the product availability. Okay, right? Okay, so the functions of supply chain management. What are the functions? The functions of supply chain management. So the first function that I would like to share with the audience now, today's is aligning flow. Aligning flow, what you need to align, what kind of flow that you need to align. First, of course, the money, because we translate supply chain into profit, into revenue, and then also the raw material. The raw material, because you procure the raw material. Okay, starting from the beginning of the supply chain and the information. So this basically will pass between customer, supplier, as well as the supply chain. Okay. Secondly, the second functions is integrating function. So we know that in each organization, in each business, in each company, they have different functions. Procurement, production function, marketing functions. So basically, by supply chain management, all these functions can be integrated well. Everybody will understand each other. Okay, and then coordinating processes. So how are we going to understand our consumer well? So every function in the organization, in the company, need to coordinate their processes well. The marketing function knows what happened in the productions, know what is the goal of the production units or function, and then the production function or production unit know what's going on or what is the goal for the procurement. Okay, so everybody will coordinate processes because these processes will translate into the good quality of product. Okay. Next, the fourth function is designing complex system. Yes, we know that under supply chain management, we can establish complex system, but it is basically will be assisted by the technology. By having technology assistance, simulation tool. So although we have a complex system, but if we have the tool assisted by the technology, we can avoid or mitigate all the risk along the supply chain. Okay, any disruptions. And managing resources, of course, the resources is basically your material, your employer, your staff, your workers. Okay, and then your stakeholder. So it's basically is how you manage your resources. Okay. Alright, so far okay, Ibu Novi? Am I too fast? Because I'm rushing.
Okay. No, everything is okay.
Alright, okay, so the third one, okay, forces driving supply chain management. What are forces? So this is basically very important. By these forces, everybody will move forward. Everybody will move forward, meaning to say that all the supply chain player. Okay, so what are the forces? First, as I mentioned earlier, the technology itself. So new communication technology. Why communication technology? Because the information has to pass from the downstream to the upstream. So these informations, this communication technology will allow manager to actively manage supply chain management. And the other forces that drive supply chain management is the demand itself. If we don't have any demand for the customer, it will not become forces, then the supply chain will not be efficiently executed. So what types of demand? Is a demand from customer. Of course, we understand that the customer will demand a lower price of product and a better product or services. Kadang-kadang consumer ni dia mengada-ngada. I do not know whether you understand mengada-ngada. Dia nak produk yang bagus tapi dengan produk berkualiti tapi harga yang murah. So if it is harga yang murah, so it's up to the manufacturer or processor to come out or to produce this kind of product. Because basically kalau murah, kalau kualiti bagus, of course cepat sangat viralnya. Viral lah kan. Kalau bahasa Malaysia viral tular. I'm not really sure about Indonesia's viral in Indonesia tular.
Same. Almost the same.
Okay, almost the same. Right. Okay. So just now it's a process, communication technology and demand. But now what are the drivers? The drivers for the supply chain performance. Okay. Ibu Novi, please remind me the times left for me. Otherwise, I might.
Yeah, we still have 15 minutes
15
because we
minutes.
need to also divide with Q&A session later on.
Okay, I'll try my best to expedite the process. Okay, drivers for the supply chain performance. So these drivers are basically very important because it will help the performance of the supply chain player. The first is facility. We need to ensure that facility in a good conditions. Inventory, you know where to store. You have the sufficient area storage with the technology. Transportation. Either you will be using your own transportation or you'll be using third-party logistic provider, meaning to say that you outsource your transportation. The information, the sourcing activity, either you source from local or you source from global, and the pricing. Okay, all right. So elements, and next is element and key features of effective supply chain management. So what are the elements that we need to consider? We have 5 major elements. The first one is planning, sourcing raw material, manufacturing and inventory, productions and transportation, and returns of goods. So this is where I've mentioned in the earlier, not lecture, sharing session, that's reverse logistic, right? Okay, so what is planning? Something that you need to plan in terms of the raw material, your resources. Okay, and then after you plan, okay, because the plan has to be translated or has to be lead to the what demand by the customer. Okay, after you plan, now you can source your raw material. Okay, so you have to select the supplier, the competent supplier, the trustworthy of supplier, the loyalty of your supplier, the flexibility of the supplier. So now, once you source your raw material, the selections of supplier has to be very crucial thoroughly. Okay, because this is the first element of your supply chain player, supply chain activity. Right? Okay, now once you source your raw material, you manufacture, and the product that you produce or manufacture will become your inventory. So you have to properly properly manage your inventory, because inventory consists of 3 types of main inventory: raw material, semi-processed inventory, as well as the processed inventory and finished product. And then after you have your inventory, you know where you store the production as well as the transportation. As mentioned previously, that transportation probably from your own transportation or from your third-party logistic. Yeah. Okay, and of course, some process flow, some equipment will not so perfect. Some of the goods probably we have defect. Okay, probably during the production, but we have QC, quality control, but probably the product will defect through the distributions. Okay, through distributions or through transportation. So this return of product need to be one of the strategy element under supply chain, because you need to return your good to the manufacturer. Okay, so this is where the reverse logistic come across. Yeah. All right. Key features of the okay. So this one is basically to how are we going to ensure that our supply chain is effective? First, connected. Connected because we know that we have Internet of Things now, IR 4.0. We have the technology, we have the system like ERP, B2B. So we need to be connected in order to be effective, collaborative. Okay, you have to be synergized with all the supply chain player because we have the network. Although it is complex network, but we have the multi-layer of network which everybody can understand each other, and also the cyber aware. Okay, here is the cyber aware is a system. Okay, and then for this security, data security, right? And then cognitively enable, coordinating between supply chain player, okay, is very important, and also the comprehensive. This one is you have to analyze whatever data that you have, like for example data analytic whatsoever, because this is will assist you in terms of to make decisions. Okay, right. The importance of supply chain management, first, to reduce losses of post harvest, probably in the agriculture. Okay, number two is to maintain your food quality and safety. Number three, of course, competitive advantage, because we understand that probably integrated, vertical integrated, or horizontal integrated becoming our competitive advantage. And the way company procure their raw material. Okay. Next is the customer. How are we going to distribute our product to the customer, and the company will understand about customer, and then how they will bring the product to the market immediately or as quick as they can. Okay, right. So just to share a little bit on the global scenario of supply chain management during COVID-19 pandemic. This is to show the experience that we have in Malaysia and the experience that we have in Indonesia, although we still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Malaysia, the government has announced that we are now in the stage of endemic. So I'm not really sure about Indonesia. Has the government, Ibu Novi, has been announced the endemic now?
In Indonesia, apparently yes, in the process of ending the endemic. Hopefully we can just travel after this and go to your place, to UPM.
Okay, good. You can travel to UPM. So now we for celebrating Eid Mubarak, everybody was so happy because we can go balik kampung, because now endemic, to see our parents, and so but we imagine that there will be very huge traffic because
Exactly.
2 years we cannot celebrate with the family member at hometown. So now this is the year that we can again go and see our parents. So everybody are so happy. Okay, but there will be, we are expected that the number of positive COVID will be increased after Eid Mubarak. But well, we we look about it. All right, so Malaysia. So this is from the perspective of Malaysia. So what happened during COVID-19 pandemic in 2020? Okay, so we can see that most of the fruits are dumped. Okay, the producer and wholesaler are forced to dump their produce due to MCO, movement control order. So they dump just like that because we cannot reach to the consumer. And then as been highlighted in the newspaper Malaysia Kini that 10,000 ton of fruits has been discarded in Klang Valley alone. Okay, in Kuala Lumpur and Selangor. And then in the supermarket, on the shelf, it basically very few product available. And then not only the fruits producer and wholesaler, the fishermen also facing the same thing, that they have to dump their produce because they are not able to get it to customer. So very pity during that time. Okay. From okay, if you can see the picture here, farmer dump their stock after police impose restrictions as wholesale market. They can count how many consumer that go to the market because MCO restriction, border restriction, state restrictions. Okay, so they are facing with the crumbling of barren shelf. They have to trash their goods. because they are unable to deliver to the customer. Okay. Alright, so this is what happened. A few of the example happened in Malaysia. Okay, what about in Indonesia? Okay, this is basically from Khairunisa 2020. Masalah di rantai pasok pangan timbulkan limbah makanan. So limbah makan ni banyak kan, makanan banyak lah ya. So what happened here, 30%, sorry, typo. Food production in the food supply chain will be wasted, especially Southeast Asia. Okay, there is more food loss in the food production chain than food waste on the part of the consumer. Okay, so this is what happened in Indonesia. Okay, timbulkan limbah makanan. Okay, Food Cycle World Food Day. Right? And then a global supply chain disruption is not over yet because we still facing this kind of disruptions. Okay, why did this disruption? Because of significant drop in demand due to lockdown. So Indonesia masih lagi lockdown?
Only a little lockdown.
Okay, setempat masih lagi lockdown ya. Okay, so yes, of course the Indonesia still facing with the disruptions. Okay, and then this is, I took it this morning. This is very interesting that one of the scholar post the opinion on the Jakarta Post. The Jakarta Post that the agility of supply chain in pandemic area. So he proposed that the supply chain need to be agile. Okay, need to be agile so that the company could improve the supply chain. So how company could improve the supply chain is basically by prioritizing resilience over efficiency. They have to come back. Okay, whatever problem they are facing, they have to come back. They need to put energy, move on. Okay, so this is what the scholar from Indonesia has highlighted. Create backup plan from their main supply chain. Okay, backup plan is you don't have supply number 1, you can opt to supply number 2. More improvement to connect more alternative supplier in global supply chain. Of course, we cannot depend on the locality, but also from the global. Okay, improvement. And always innovate in technology and strategy by use of Internet of Things and IR 4.0. Okay, so this is what has been highlighted by the scholar from Indonesia. Alright, so in conclusion, this is my last slide. Everybody are so happy, release. Okay, the conclusion that I would like to share for today's sharing sessions is, well, supply chain is an important part for every organization as it improves the effectiveness, efficiency, management of resources, because it starts from the beginning of the supply chain, the huluan dan hiliran, the upstream and downstream. So it's also established good and prominent relationship because we have a complex network just now, but with the traceability and tracking element, we can have a good relationship with stakeholder like our supplier, manufacturer and customer. And finally, you will integrate and combine the entire business activity. You synergize, everybody has the synergize the effort and take care of each step that ultimately help in achieving satisfactions of customer and goal of the company. So everybody will work together. So with that, I thank you. That's might be my part of my last slide. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for the informative presentation, Dr. Niti Hirawati. And now let's just go to the Q&A session. We are very happy to say that there is also some question, but because they are very shy, so they send me to the WhatsApp group. Yeah, but
it's okay if the student, if the mahasiswa would like to ask questions.
Mahasiswa and also docent has questions.
Yeah, it's okay. I accept both languages if I understand Indonesia.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, now I will be waiting for you, for those who are going to have a raise hand, and also in you can use the chat box. And I would like to read the first question. This is from Professor Joko.
Profesor tanya saya soalan. Takutnya.
Asking me question, Professor
Yes,
Joko.
Professor.
All right. So basically, he was very interested in having two questions. The first one is regarding to the supply chain course in UPM. Okay. So is it only being taught in S1 or undergraduate or also postgraduate? So the first question. And the second question is, what about in UPM? As you know that in Brawijaya University itself, we have Faculty of Agriculture and Faculty of Agricultural Technology. So sometimes we have a bit different in terms of the product that is processed. For example, in Faculty of Agriculture, we mainly or basically focus on the primary product, for example, like vegetables, fruit, eggs, fish, and dairy. And while the secondary product is more of a product that is paid attention by Faculty of Agricultural Technology. So wait a moment, please. So what is your opinion? I mean, what is the priority for the Faculty of Agriculture and Agricultural Technology so that it will not be overlapping? Okay, that was the first question from Prof. Joko. Forgive me if I'm making a mistake, Prof. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Joko, for the question just now. I try my best to answer, Prof. In our faculty in UPM, so the supply chain management, if it is generally in terms of the supply chain management, it is offered by School of Business and Economics. So basically, it is a very general supply chain management. So I think it is one of the compulsory course. For Faculty of Agriculture, in my faculty, the course of supply chain management is offered by departments of agribusiness and bioresource economics, which is my department, and I happen to be the head of department for agribusiness and bioresource economics. So previously, from the previous program, the supply chain management become the compulsory course. But after we revised our program, supply chain management has now become the elective, meaning to say that the student has the opportunity, if they would like to know further in terms of the supply chain management, they can take the course as an elective. Bukan wajib lah. Maksudnya elective tu basically based on the interest of the supply chain, because supply chain management has the content, the content of supply chain management element has been touched in one or two courses as a wajib course, compulsory course. So if they would like to increase further, to know in depth in terms of supply chain, they can take that as their elective course. And basically, supply chain management offer in the bachelor S1 in Indonesia, S1.
Yes.
Okay, so for S2, we highlight supply chain management in one of the course, S2, master in management, agribusiness management or agribusiness marketing. Okay, so that one is my answer from the first question. For the second question, in my faculty, we have 7 departments. Okay, so 6 departments are basically from the technical perspective, and the only department that social economics is my department. So our task is basically what has been innovate by the 6 department, Jabatan Sains Tanaman, Crop Science, Perlindungan Tumbuhan, Protection, Teknologi Pertanian, Animal Science, Sains Haiwan, Aquaculture, okay, apa lagi, pengurusan tanah. So we will assist this 6 department in terms of the agribusiness. We process, we provide information to the student that once you produce, you know how to deal with the disease, with the technology, then you will now, bring forward or flow it out to the consumer. So basically in our department, the student will be taught in terms of how to market, how to manage the resources with the technology that has been innovated by the technology departments of technology, pertanian, agriculture technology. So in our faculty, it's like one teamwork that everybody from the technical as well as the social science departments. So I understand that in Brawijaya you have difference, right? Different faculty, Faculty of Agriculture as well as the Faculty of Agribusiness. But I'm sure that everybody will have the same goal, which means that to produce graduate mahasiswa yang tahu bagaimana di peringkat ladang pengeluaran pertanian dilaksanakan dan apakah potensi-potensi this product bila mana ianya dipasarkan, ada tak potensi ianya dipasarkan. I'm sure that that element will be highlighted or addressed by the Faculty of Agribusiness. How they need to market the product. Tak akan menjadi kita tak akan achieve the goal that the product will reach to the customer kalau kita keluar tapi kita tak tahu macam mana nak market. I'm sorry to say this is Malay. Sometimes I need to say in Malay.
It's all right. Okay.
Yeah, so we need to also provide the ilmu of the macam mana nak pasarkan dengan teknologi. I'm sure that because e-marketplace, we have the e-platform for the product to be sold to the customer.
Right.
Okay, Bapak Joko, Professor Joko, I hope that my answer, your question has been answered just now. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your clear explanation. And now we go with the next Q&A session. We have a raised hand from Adila. Hello, Adila. Can you turn on your camera?
Sorry, ma'am, I have trouble in my connection, so I cannot turn on my camera, but I can turn on my microphone.
All right, please.
Okay, firstly, I wanna say thank you for you as a speaker to our Faculty of Agriculture at University of Brawijaya. And for my question is, how to looking for a good raw material wisely and in a real time in abroad while we are not able to see it like in a real time, because I think it's kind of hard to know the quality of that raw material if we cannot see the product or the raw material in a real time. Maybe it's my question. Thank you.
All right, so how to search for a quality raw material? That is the question.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Kalau student panggil apa ya? Anak-anak.
Yeah, mahasiswa maybe.
Mahasiswa. Okay, mahasiswa Adila. For raw material, of course, before we make business dealing with the supplier, of course, we need to discuss both party. So once we discuss with both party, and then if we have agreement what types of raw material will be procured, will be sold to the buyer. Okay, let's say in our case, us as a buyer. So that would be one of the elements that we ensure that the raw material, although we cannot see it in real time, but there will be specifications. Okay, specifications of those material that has been put on a piece of paper. In this case, your business dealing, your contract. Okay, because if we would like to procure raw material in bulky, there must be legality in terms of that. Because to secure the interest of the both party. Okay, so all the checklist of what types of material, the quality of material has to be clearly understood by both party, so that we have to trust our supplier, because we have already discussed with that. But for to see the real supplier using real time, of course, with the technology we can see it. Sometimes I understand that from the picture it looks great, but when it comes to the reality, it's not look great. But this is where the business dealing is important, the contract, the discussion with your supplier. So if they are making problem with the company, you have the right to, discontinue the contract, because they are not, consider your right as a buyer. Okay, so that's part of the lawyer supplier. You have a good relationship, long-term relationship with supplier. So these are the elements. Okay, unless if you try to deal with a new supplier, of course, there are many elements that you need to consider. That's why for the raw material, it is very important to have QC. Okay, the moment you receive your raw material, the QC becoming the very important, very important element to see whether the raw material that we receive by your company is what you have agreed with your supplier. Okay, mahasiswa Adila.
You can pick
Yes,
your
ma'am. Thank you for
question.
your explanation.
I hope that it can answer your question, Adila. Thank you very much for that. So it is very important to pay attention to the information sharing, maybe, and also the QC. All right. Wow, we have so many students who is going to ask. We have limitation of time. It's all right. So Muhammad Fauzi from class H. Okay, you have a question?
Thank you for the opportunity. I will ask about two questions. The first question is what the government can help to address the problem and the effects of the supply chain problem both domestically and internationally. The second question is how is the relationship between supply chain problem with current inflation, product price, and the consumer price index or CPI? Because to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which is right now cause problem to the supply chain, and there has been an increase in global inflation, product price, and the CPI globally. Thank you.
Okay, would you please repeat the second question, relationship of supply chain with apa tadi, Kak?
With current inflation, inflasi.
Inflation. All right. Okay. So the first one is what does the government do to overcome the problem? And the second one is relationship between supply chain and also the CPI or inflation related to the case study mentioned by the student, that is global inflation caused by the Russia conflict. Like that. All right.
Okay, mahasiswa Fauzi, right? For the first question, I heard you clearly, but for the second question, it is all about the inflation and then the conflict between the Russia, right? Russia and
Ukraine, yes.
Okay. So the first question is government role. I think what the government roles from this perspective of the COVID-19 is their support. Meaning to say that incentive support. Okay, let's just now I show in the slide that during MCO they are dumped, right? Lots of the producer dump their product. So in this case, government has to be firm in terms of where the supply chain player need to sell their product. need to sell their product so that everybody will go to that particular area which has been watakkan by the government. Okay, so that the product can reach by the customer, although some part some part it has been restricted in terms of the movements of the produce. So the government role is basically in terms of to support by providing last time for the fresh produce, the consumer need to go to the market to get the fresh produce. But the government has encouraged the industry player, that they have a high potential for the producer to sell their produce online. So they will ensure that their produce will reach to the customer in a short period of time. Although the price will be a little bit higher, but with that they can reduce the waste, okay, in terms of the dumping of the produce. At least they will cover the cost of operations. Okay, so that one is the first question. For the inflation, for the Russia and Ukraine, the most important element that we have to look is the raw material, because we know that the Ukraine, the main producer of corn, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now what going to happen is our raw material is basically mainly from corn. So there will be high price of raw material, and if it is high price of material, how are you going to bear the price when you produce your product? Of course, you know, you need to increase the price of the product, finished product. But the most important element question is whether your consumer will have the interest to buy your product with a new price. So in that case, you probably need to have alternative, not depending too much on Ukraine, because Russia, Ukraine. So you have to have alternative in terms of procuring your raw material.
Yes.
Raw material. Okay. So you have got to look into what types of product that you're producing and the raw material that you are procuring, because sourcing can be from the local and sourcing can be from the global. So if you have depending too much on the global sourcing, this might be happened, the raw material. Okay. Mahasiswa Fauzi.
Mahasiswa Fauzi, I hope that it can answer your question. Okay, Mahasiswa Fauzi. Yes. All right. So beside the student of University of Brawijaya, actually this guest lecture also has been attended by an exchange student from University of Pajajaran. I would like to say good afternoon, good morning, yes, still in the morning. If you have any question, you can also raise your hand seperti itu. Alright, this is part of Kampus Merdeka program. Okay, so we have one more question only. Gracia Ezra from Kelas K. Okay.
My voice.
Please go on. Yes.
Okay. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Ma'am Novi as the host today and our honorable guest lecturer, Ma'am Niti Hirawati. I would like to ask, is distributor will remain in supply chains in the future? Because e-markets allow producers, and consumers to meet directly without the help of distributor. Thank you.
All right, so we are talking about the position of distributor in the supply chain.
Sorry,
This voice is very soft. All right, Ezra, would you please repeat again the question?
Okay. My question is, is distributor will still remain in supply chains in the future because e-markets nowadays allow producers and consumers to meet directly.
Without a market in physical, right? Okay.
Okay, Gracia, mahasiswa Gracia. So you are looking the distributor from the perspective of the middleman, right?
Gracia?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So yes, of course we try to reduce the role of middleman, but we cannot just eliminate the middleman, particularly the distributor, because one of the elements that the outbound, and then to ensure that the finished product, particularly to reach to customer in a short period of time, lead distribution, lead time. So we sometimes the industry, the company or the business need to also depend to the distributor. Okay, so this distributor can be part of your third party logistics service provider, or you outsource. Sometimes if you outsource your distributions activity, the cost that you have to bear will be cheaper than if you use your own transportation. If you have your own transportation, okay, so of course it is easy for you to distribute your product, but you have to ask whether with your own distributions or with your own transportation the cost will be a little bit higher, or if you use your third party or outsource your distributions activity, the cost will be a little bit reduced, because along supply chain management there will be cost of distributions. Okay, so from my personal opinion, we still need to have distributions. Okay, because it will partly will assist in terms of to ensure the movements of the product, the lead time of the product. Okay, but this is basically depending on the size of the company as well, because some of the company, if they have the size of the company is very huge, of course they will have their own transportations. But for the company that operate in the small scale like SME, I do not know in Indonesia, perusahaan industri kecil sederhana, right? So some of them, they don't have their own transportation, though they might need to depend to the third party. So this where distributions activity, third party distributor will be in place to assist the distributions activity. Okay, Gracia.
Yes, ma'am.
I hope that it can answer your question, Gracias.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Ibu Novi, from the chat box we have questions, right?
Oh yeah. Wait.
So whether we need to entertain or?
Yeah, we have one more. Is it from Muhammad Fauzi? No. Okay. From Mega Savitri, I would like to read. Good morning, ma'am. My name is Mega Savitri from Class D. I would like to ask related supply chain management. We know that pandemic gave some problems in each step supply chain. So what is your opinion, Dr. Niti, about the strategy to minimize it, the risk in the pandemic, I think?
Okay. So I think this question has been highlighted during the mahasiswa Fauzi, right? But anyway, the government support has to be embedded throughout during pandemic, because of course the production has been dropped significantly. So without the assistance of the government, okay, so it will not the business will not recover in a short period of time. So the strategy is everybody need to work together, not only from the supplier but also to the consumptions part of the supply chain. Okay, because everybody has to be move on, resilient, synergize everything so that the supply chain can be back okay, can be moved back to the original of the supply chain efficiency. So the strategy has to also be part of the government role as well.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I hope that it can answer the question of Mega Savitri. Thank you very much for your question. Now we come to the end session of guest lecture. Before we finish and I give it back to the MC, is there any message for our student who is interested in learning more about supply chain management in the era of IoT and Revolution Industry 4.0? Dr. Niti, please. Is there any message?
Sorry. Yeah. So I thought that Ibu Nobi passed the MC. Okay. All right. So I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be part of the of this event as a guest lecturer. Supply chain is very interesting topic, but it evolves from time to time with the technology that we understand that it is part of the to be competitive advantage with the other country. So we cannot operate alone, but with the help with the other supply chain player, not only for the local but also in the global. So if you would like to share anything about supply chain management, you can reach me through my email. Probably Ibu Novi can share my email address to everyone. So I welcome any remark, any comment, sharing with me, although I'm not in Indonesia but in Malaysia. So I wish all of you good luck. Hope that this session will give you some information about what is supply chain is all about. Although it is very surface, very general, but I'm happy to be shared with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Don't worry, because we still have one more session with Dr. Niti in the third meeting during this semester on May. So we still able to meet you. So if all students or mahasiswa wanted to ask a question later on, we can still meet again. So that was the end of the guest lecture. I would like you to give an applause for Dr. Niti Hirawati. Thank you very much for the time. And I'm going to turn it back to the MC, Miss Imaniar. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye-bye.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Mrs. Novi Haryati, as the moderator. Thank you so much for Dr. Niti for your great explanation about supply chain management. We hope that Dr. Niti explanation is very clear and easy to understand. And also we have some additional knowledge about the Malaysia and Indonesia conditions. Besides that, all the participants will also receive additional explanation from the class lecture or tutor lecture in accordance with the class agreements. And don't forget to fill the Zoom absent that already we share on the chat Zoom. And also please have communication with your class lecturers for the regular absent according to the schedule. I'm as the representative of the committee and also the Laboratory of Production and Operational Agribusiness Management. We would like to say apologize if there are any mistake in our activity. And thank you once again for the visiting professor, Dr. Niti, and also all the Brawijaya lecturers and our more 290 students as the participants who come today, and for all the committee that already arranged this program. We also inform that we invite all of you in the next 3-in-1 series, which will be held on May 10 May and also 17 May 2022 from the professional practitioners. And we will meet Dr. Niti again on 24th May 2022. It will be great for us to have you in our 3-in-1 series program. Hopefully, these activities bring benefit to all of us. Stay healthy. Good morning. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you
All
so
the
much,
best.
Dr. Niti.
You're welcome, Ibu. Bye. Jumpa lagi on
Yeah.
24th of
Ya,
May,
jumpa
right?
lagi.
Yes.
Okay.
Alright, thank you.
After
Okay.
Ramadan.
Happy Ramadan and Eid
Yeah.
Mubarak.
Bye.
Okay, bye. Assalamualaikum.